My name is Dorothy, but people call me Dot, and I'm 61 years old. Just a few months ago, I thought my life had finally taken a turn for the better. After years of scrimping, watching every penny, and worrying about whether my pension would stretch, I won £15 million on the lottery. 15 million. I couldn't believe it. I cried, I laughed, I thought it was a miracle. For the first time since losing my husband Michael, I felt secure. But then, just as quickly as the joy came, it began to crumble. One ordinary afternoon, I was carrying a basket of laundry upstairs when I froze on the landing. I heard my daughter Emily's voice through the half-open door of the spare room. Her tone was low, sharp, conspiratorial. I held my breath. "Increase the dose," she whispered. "By Christmas she won't know herself. The money will be ours." My knees nearly gave way. The basket tipped against the banister. For a moment I thought I must have misheard. Surely my own daughter hadn't just plotted my slow disappearance. But the words rang clear as a bell. By Christmas she won't know herself. I had gone from holding a golden ticket to feeling like a prisoner in my own home. I thought money had saved me. Instead, it nearly destroyed me. If you want to hear how I uncovered the truth, confronted my own daughter, and fought to keep my dignity, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happened next. Before all of this, my life was simple. Ordinary in the way most lives are. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, the same house Michael and I bought when Emily was just a toddler. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. A place filled with the scent of Sunday roasts, laughter that carried down the hallway, and the quiet hum of life well lived. My mornings followed a steady rhythm. I'd shuffle downstairs in my slippers, boil the kettle, and wait for the comforting whistle. 1 sugar, splash of milk, and then I'd sit at the small kitchen table by the window. From there, I watched the postman cross the street every morning at 9:10. He always gave a little wave. Routine like that, you come to depend on it. Saturdays were my favorite. I'd walk to the corner shop to pick up the paper, maybe a pint of milk, and always, without fail, 1 lottery ticket. A little ritual I'd kept for years, even when money was tight. "It's just a bit of hope in your pocket," Michael used to say, his hand warm over mine as I tucked the slip into my purse. After he passed, I kept buying them. It made me feel connected to him, as though somewhere he was smiling at my stubborn optimism. Life without him had been hard. Retirement planning had felt like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. The pension was barely enough, and I'd often catch myself calculating in the supermarket, deciding which things I could stretch for and which I couldn't. A roast chicken was a treat, a small indulgence for Sundays when Emily came over. We'd sit together, her phone always close to her hand, and I'd try to recreate the dinners she loved as a child. Roast potatoes crisp on the outside, soft in the middle, and apple crumble with custard to follow. Back then, I thought we were close. Emily was 34, independent, a bit bossy at times, but she was my girl. We had traditions, baking together on Sundays, leafing through old photo albums, laughing at Michael's terrible fashion choices. She'd tease me about my old-fashioned ways, and I'd tease her about never calling enough. Still, I believed we were tied together by something unshakable. I wore my wedding ring every day. It wasn't extravagant, just a simple gold band with a tiny stone Michael could barely afford when we were young. But it anchored me. A reminder that once upon a time, I'd been loved fiercely and honestly. Every time I twisted it on my finger, I remembered the promise he made: "I'll always look after you." I never imagined I'd have to look after myself against our own daughter. On the fridge, beneath a magnet shaped like a teapot, was our last family photo together. Michael, me, and Emily, smiling awkwardly on the beach at Scarborough. The sea wind had blown my hair in every direction. Emily was sunburned, and Michael's shirt was half untucked. But I loved that photo. It was imperfect, but real. It was the picture of us before life thinned us out with grief. And then there were the pills. Just a small prescription for my blood pressure, nothing dramatic. 1 in the morning with my tea. Routine, innocent. I never thought much about them until later, when they became something sinister in Emily's hands. the day everything changed, started like any other. I went to the shop with my canvas bag, bought bread, milk, and of course, my ticket. I tucked it under the magnet on the fridge next to the photo like I always did. Later that week, when I was washing dishes, the numbers came up on the telly. I wasn't even paying attention at first. But then, there they were, one by one. My numbers. I dropped the plate I was holding. Soap suds spilled everywhere, but I didn't care. I stared at the screen, heart hammering, counting them over and over. 15 million pounds. Me. A widow who'd been budgeting tea bags and worrying about the heating bill. I didn't believe it, not at first. I must have checked it 20 times on the telly, in the paper, on the little slip itself. My hand shook as I called the hotline, the woman's calm voice confirming it. Yes, Mrs. Thompson. You are the winner. I sat at the table and cried, whispering Michael's name. We did it, love. We finally did it. Telling Emily was the next step. I expected squeals of joy, tears, plans for the future. And yes, she was excited at first. She hugged me, nearly knocked the chair over, and kept saying, Mum, this changes everything. But even in that moment, there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. A calculation, a sharpness. It passed quickly, replaced with smiles, but I saw it. From then on, Emily seemed determined to help. She insisted on handling calls, said it was overwhelming for me. She brought home forms, pushed pens into my hand. Just sign here, Mum. Don't worry about the details. She started talking about investments, trusts, tax breaks, things I'd never heard her care about before. At first, I told myself she was being protective. After all, she was younger, more worldly. Maybe she wanted to make sure I didn't get taken advantage of. But then, she began hovering over my pills, reminding me every morning in a voice that felt oddly rehearsed. She even offered to collect my prescriptions, something she'd never shown interest in before. It was subtle, so subtle I brushed it aside. I wanted to believe she was helping, that she had my best interests at heart. But even then, in the quiet moments, twisting my wedding ring, staring at that photo on the fridge, I felt something tugging inside me. A whisper of doubt. And I wish I'd listened to it sooner. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I'd just finished folding the towels and carried the laundry basket upstairs. Nothing unusual, just the rhythm of a quiet life. My slippers brushed against the carpet, the weight of the basket tugging at my arms when I heard it. Emily's voice, low, sharp, coming from the spare room. I slowed, adjusting the basket against my hip, careful not to creak the floorboards. The door was ajar, just a crack, enough for her words to slip through. Just increase the dose, she whispered. By Christmas she won't know herself. The money will be ours. The basket slipped, banging against the banister. My breath caught in my throat. My heart seemed to stop, then pound so violently I thought she'd hear it. The pills in my pocket, the ones I'd taken from the kitchen counter to refill the bedside box, rattled softly in their plastic container. That sound, faint and hollow, felt like a cruel echo of what she'd just said. Pills. Dose. By Christmas. I stood frozen. My daughter, my only child, was talking about me as though I were an obstacle. Not a person, not her mother. At first, I told myself I must have misheard, that it couldn't be what it sounded like. Perhaps she was talking about someone at work or a friend's problem, but the words, the money will be ours. My stomach lurched. There was no mistaking it. I leaned against the wallpaper pressing cold against my back. My knees threatened to give way. A hot wave of nausea rolled through me, and I gripped the laundry basket for balance. Inside my chest, everything screamed at once. Fear, confusion, disbelief. Emily? My Emily? The same little girl who used to curl up beside me on stormy nights, clutching my hand, whispering, "Don't let go, Mum." I could still picture her as a child in the kitchen, flour dusting her nose as we baked fairy cakes together. How could the girl I raised, the girl Michael and I adored, plot something so dark? I wanted to burst through the door, demand an explanation. But my body wouldn't move. Instead, I heard Michael's voice, as clear as if he stood beside me. A memory, not a ghost, but real enough to make me shiver. Protect what matters most. It was something he'd said when we updated our will years ago. He'd been practical, thoughtful, making sure Emily and I would be safe if anything happened to him. And now those words returned, as though he knew I'd need them one day. Protect what matters most. I clutched my wedding ring, twisting it around and around, grounding myself. But inside, my mind spun. What did Emily mean? Increase the dose, she could only mean my pills. The blood pressure tablets I took each morning, faithfully, with my tea. The ones she'd so helpfully reminded me about. I swallowed hard, bile rising. Could she be trying to change me, weaken me, so I wouldn't notice what she was doing with the money? By Christmas, I wouldn't know myself. The thought was so vile, so cruel, I couldn't take it in. The sound of her laughter followed, light, rehearsed, the kind she used when she wanted to convince someone of her cleverness. Trust me, she won't notice a thing. The basket slipped from my hands, landing with a dull thud on the carpet. Socks and towels spilled across the landing, but I hardly noticed. My world had already spilled open, scattered in pieces I couldn't gather. I backed away, careful, silent, heart hammering so loudly I thought it might echo through the walls. In that moment, standing outside the door, I felt two truths battling inside me. 1. I was a mother who loved her daughter more than life. 2. I was a woman who had just overheard her own flesh and blood plotting her destruction. Tears blurred my vision. My chest ached with the weight of it. I stumbled into my bedroom, shut the door quietly, and sank onto the bed. The pill bottle was still in my hand. I shook it once, hearing the hollow rattle, and felt my stomach twist. Was my own child plotting my slow erasure? That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every tick of the clock pounding louder than my own heartbeat. Emily's words replayed over and over. Increase the dose. By Christmas, she won't know herself. It was as if someone had carved the phrase into my skull. By morning, I knew I had to test reality. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I'd misheard, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. When Emily left for work, I went straight to the kitchen cupboard where I kept my tablets. I lined up the little white pills in my palm, squinting at them under the light. They looked the same as always, but something felt off. The edges seemed slightly rougher, the shade just a little different, almost chalkier. I picked up an old empty packet from the drawer and compared them side by side. My stomach lurched. They weren't identical. The label on the bottle read exactly what it should. My name, the correct dosage, the doctor's details. Perfectly normal. But the pills themselves, I couldn't shake the doubt. I dug through the kitchen bin, hands trembling, searching under tea bags and eggshells. At the bottom, I found a crumpled pharmacy receipt. The date matched last week, but the number of tablets didn't. The receipt showed 60. My bottle only had 40 left. My breath caught. Where had the others gone? Later that day, while dusting the living room, I noticed the calendar on the wall. My eyes landed on December. In Emily's handwriting, her distinctive looping letters, she had scribbled, Christmas, freedom, freedom. My throat went dry. Freedom from what? From me? I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. It could have meant anything, I told myself. A holiday. A trip. A joke. But deep down, I knew it didn't. Everyday life became a stage, and I was forced to perform. At breakfast, I smiled while Emily poured the tea, my hand steady though my heart was racing. I nodded when she reminded me about my tablets, pretending to swallow them with a sip of water. But I slipped them into my pocket instead. I felt like a criminal in my own home, hiding from the person I had loved most. Some days I pretended to nap in the armchair, eyes half closed, while Emily whispered on the phone. I only caught fragments. Yes, she's taking them, slower than I'd like, patience, it'll pay off. Each word was a knife to the gut. One afternoon, when I finally worked up the courage, I went into town and stopped at the pharmacy. I waited until no one else was in the shop, then leaned over the counter and spoke quietly to the young man who usually served me. I know this sounds silly, I whispered, showing him a few pills in my hand. But these don't look the same as before. Could there be a mix-up? He studied them, frowning slightly. Well, they are the same medication, Mrs. Thompson, but this batch isn't one we dispensed here. See the imprint? Ours always carry a different mark. His words made the blood drain from my face. Different supplier? Different pills? But why were mine changed if the bottle label hadn't? I thanked him, forced a smile, and walked out into the cold air. My legs shook all the way home. That evening, Emily came bustling in, cheerful and sweet, cooking pasta as if nothing in the world was wrong. I sat at the table, twisting my wedding ring, forcing myself not to confront her then and there, because here was the terrible truth. I didn't want to believe it. She was my daughter, the girl I'd raised with bedtime stories and school uniforms, the girl Michael had carried on his shoulders through the park. How could I accept that she might be trying to erase me, dose by dose? But the signs piled up. She kept hovering whenever I took my pills, eyes sharp, watching me swallow. She'd smile and say, "Good girl, Mum," as though I were a child. And each time, I tucked them into my pocket instead, the secret weight of them pressing against me all day. I started keeping a small tin under my bed, where I emptied the tablets every evening. Proof, I told myself. If this went on, I'd have more than enough evidence. Still, my heart battled itself. Some nights I cried into my pillow, praying I was wrong. Maybe Emily was stressed. Maybe money had changed her, but not to the point of cruelty. Other nights I felt a cold clarity. Her notes, her calls, the pharmacy's words, they weren't accidents. And so, every moment of my life became an act of survival. I smiled through dinners. I pretended weakness when she spoke to me in that patronizing tone. I listened carefully, storing away every clue. The love of a mother doesn't vanish overnight. But as I watched Emily laugh across the table, phone buzzing with messages she wouldn't explain, a shadow grew in me. Because love, I realized, wasn't enough to protect me anymore. The truth showed itself on a drizzly Thursday morning. Emily had come back from town with bags of shopping and asked me to help carry them in. Her handbag, heavy and overstuffed, slid off her shoulder and onto the kitchen chair. As she busied herself with unpacking tins of soup and a loaf of bread, I noticed the zip was partly open. It wasn't snooping, not really. At least that's what I told myself as my fingers brushed the opening. Something inside rattled, familiar, unmistakable. A pill bottle. I slicked it out quickly, shielding it behind the grocery bag. My hands shook as I read the label. It wasn't mine. Different name, different drug. Sedatives, far stronger than anything I'd ever been prescribed. I froze, the bottle cold in my hand. She had been carrying them around, hidden in her bag. My mind flashed to the morning she'd hovered by my side, offering my tablets with that strange little smile. I put the bottle back before she turned, my heart racing so loudly I thought she'd hear it. But in that moment, I knew. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't stress or paranoia on my part. Emily had been swapping my medication, replacing it with pills meant to dull me, weaken me, make me slip away slowly. That night, as I lay awake, the realization sat like a stone in my stomach. This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. My own daughter had been planning my disappearance, step by careful step. 2 days later, my suspicions deepened. I was ironing in the dining room when I heard Emily's voice again, muffled but distinct, drifting from the kitchen where she spoke on the phone. I kept the iron moving, pretending not to listen, but every word lodged itself in me. "Once she starts slipping," Emily said, her tone clipped, "the solicitor won't question a thing." I set the iron down, hand trembling against the fabric. Slipping. Solicitor. The words made me cold all over. This wasn't only about making me foggy, it was about control. Control over the money, the will. The house Michael and I had built together, brick by brick, memory by memory. I leaned against the table, pressing my palms flat, trying to steady myself. In that moment, everything fit together. The way she rushed to handle the lottery calls. The way she pressed papers into my hands without explanation. Her sudden interest in my prescriptions. Even the note on the calendar, Christmas, freedom. It all pointed in one direction. She wanted me out of the way. Not dead, perhaps, not directly, but dulled, erased, a shadow of myself, unable to question, unable to resist. By Christmas, she would have full control, and no solicitor would challenge her. I thought of Michael's wedding ring, warm against my skin, the promise he'd made to look after me. I thought of the photo on the fridge, our imperfect little family smiling at the seaside. And I thought of the pills hidden under my bed, proof of what Emily had been doing to me. Tears welled in my eyes, but I swallowed them down. Grief, anger, love, and betrayal tangled together until I could barely breathe. She was my daughter, my only child. How could she look me in the eye each day, pour me tea, ask about my health, while secretly plotting my undoing? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark at the kitchen table, staring at the fridge where the winning ticket still sat under the teapot magnet. I thought winning 15 million had saved me. But now I understood. It had marked me. It had turned my daughter into someone I no longer recognized. And for the first time, I admitted the full truth to myself. It wasn't just about health. It was about power, money, and the deed to my home. Emily wanted everything, and she was willing to erase me to get it. If discovering the pills was the crack in the dam, the weeks that followed were the flood. Emily grew bolder, her confidence swelling as though she already believed I was slipping away. She began taking my bank statements from the post before I even saw them. She insisted on paying bills to make life easier. She had the audacity to put a stack of papers in front of me one morning, her manicured finger tapping at the dotted line. "It's just for your protection, Mum," she said, her tone honeyed but sharp beneath, "so no one can take advantage of you." I stared at the papers, something to do with joint accounts with transferring authority. My stomach twisted. I pressed my pen to the table, not the page. "Emily," I said softly, "your father trusted me to manage just fine." She sighed in that exaggerated way, as if I were a stubborn child. "Mum, you're forgetful. Let me handle this." Her words pierced me. Forgetful? She was already weaving the story of my decline, preparing the world for the version of me she wanted them to see, weak, confused, dependent. I didn't sign, not that day. But the pressure mounted. As December approached, she threw herself into Christmas planning. But instead of the familiar warmth of family dinners, mince pies, and our Sunday baking traditions, she announced something entirely different. "I've invited some friends this year," she said briskly, rearranging the fridge magnets as if they were pawns on a board. "You'll love them. They'll help take care of everything." Friends. I had never heard their names before. When I asked, she waved me off. "You won't need to worry about a thing, Mum. Just sit and enjoy yourself." But the way she said it chilled me. These weren't friends for me. They were allies for her, witnesses to a version of Christmas where I sat quietly in the corner, nodding along, half-dazed from pills I no longer swallowed. I pretended to play along. I let my hands tremble slightly as I lifted my teacup, let my voice waver when I asked the same question twice. I let her believe I was weakening, fading. And all the while, I slipped my tablets into my pocket instead of swallowing them, hiding them in a little tin under the bed. Proof. Evidence. But pretending took its toll. Each time I looked at Emily, a wave of grief crashed over me. This was my daughter, the little girl who used to lick cake batter off the spoon, who once crawled into my bed after nightmares, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Now she looked at me as though I were a prize to be claimed, a problem to be managed. The loneliness gnawed at me. My neighbors, dear friends from church coffee mornings, began to notice I wasn't around as often. Mrs. Harper knocked one Tuesday with a plate of shortbread, but Emily intercepted her. "Mum's resting," she said firmly, standing in the doorway with her arms folded. "She gets confused if she's disturbed." I heard it all from the hallway, my fists clenched. Confused. She was painting the picture so carefully, each stroke convincing, so that when the time came, no one would question her version of events. Even our postman, cheerful as ever, asked, "Not seeing you out much lately, Dot. Everything all right?" Before I could answer, Emily called over my shoulder, "She's fine, just a bit tired these days." And I smiled weakly, betraying myself, because I couldn't yet afford to tip my hand. The walls of my own home seemed to close in on me. Emily moved things around, my documents, my letters, even Michael's ring when I left it on the kitchen counter. "Safekeeping," she'd say, sliding it into a drawer I no longer had access to. Every move she made tightened her grip, each action designed to strip away my independence until I would no longer be able to protest. At night, I would sit at the kitchen table, fingers tracing the edge of the fridge magnet that held the winning ticket. It felt less like a blessing now and more like a curse, the very thing that had poisoned my daughter's heart. Her voice replayed in my mind over and over. By Christmas, she won't know herself, and every day that passed brought us closer to that deadline. The tension in me grew unbearable. I tried to reach out in small ways, asking Emily if we could invite old friends, suggesting we bake mince pies like we used to. She smiled, too wide, her tone patronizing. "Oh, Mum, that's too much for you now. Let me handle it." Every "let me handle it" was another nail in the coffin she was quietly building for me, but I kept playing my part. I feigned forgetfulness, asked her to remind me of dates, repeated myself just enough to convince her I was slipping, and as she leaned further into her role as caretaker, I clutched tighter to Michael's voice echoing in my mind. Protect what matters most. Still, each day felt like sand slipping through my fingers. The fear wasn't just that Emily would succeed, it was that I wouldn't act in time. Christmas lights appeared in windows up and down the street, cheerful and warm, while inside my house, shadows lengthened. I couldn't shake the thought, if I didn't find a way to fight back, by Christmas I might truly vanish, not in body, but in spirit. Erased by the very daughter I had once trusted with my life. And so I waited, and I watched, my heart heavy with grief for the child I thought I'd raised, and terrified of the stranger she had become. The days leading up to Christmas were a blur of lights and dread. Outside, houses twinkled with cheer, but inside mine, the air grew thick with secrets. I couldn't bear the weight of silence any longer, so I did something Emily hadn't expected. I went to see a solicitor. I told Emily I had a doctor's appointment. She nodded, distracted, as she scrolled through my bank app on her phone, a privilege she had given herself. But instead of heading to the surgery, I walked slowly, deliberately, to the solicitor's office on the high street. My wedding ring glinted in the pale winter sun as I opened the heavy glass door, and I swear I felt Michael walking beside me. Inside, I laid everything out. The pills I'd hidden in a tin under my bed, the strange papers Emily had pushed across the table, and the scribbled note on her calendar. My voice trembled, but my resolve didn't. The solicitor, a kind man in his 50s named Mr. Graham, listened carefully. Then he leaned forward, brow furrowing. "Mrs. Turner," he said, sliding a file across the desk, "I'm afraid it may already be worse than you thought." He opened it, revealing documents I had never seen before. A new draft of my will. And there, bold across the bottom, was my signature. Or rather, something that tried to be my signature. "She's already submitted this for review," he said quietly. "It leaves everything, your estate, your winnings, even your home, solely to your daughter." The room spun. I gripped the arm of the chair to steady myself. "That's not my handwriting," I whispered. "Mr. Graham nodded. "I suspected as much. Forgery. But proving it requires evidence. The evidence came in the smallest, most ordinary object, a family photo. Mr. Graham asked me to bring any document from years past that bore my real handwriting. That evening, with trembling hands, I pulled down the photo from the fridge, the one of me, Michael, and Emily at the seaside when she was 12. On the back, in faded ink, I had scrawled Brighton 2003. When Mr. Graham placed the photo beside the forged will, the difference screamed off the page. My loops were rounded, deliberate. The forgery was rushed, jagged. Even to my tired eyes, the contrast was clear. That photo, a symbol of happier days, became the key to proving the darkness of the present. The second confirmation came from the pharmacist. I returned discreetly with my pill bottle, asking gentle questions. The pharmacist examined the tablets, his face tightening. "These aren't the ones we dispensed to you last month," he said carefully. "The dosage is far higher. Someone's been tampering." There it was, the proof of what I already knew in my bones. Armed with the photo, the pills, and the solicitor's warning, I asked Mr. Graham to help me confront Emily. We arranged a meeting at his office under the pretense of reviewing financial protections. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Harper, to come as a witness, though I didn't tell her everything. just enough so she wouldn't let Emily twist the truth. When the day came, my heart pounded like a drum. Emily breezed into the office, hair perfectly styled, her smile as polished as glass. She sat opposite me, patting my hand. "Don't worry, Mum. I'll make sure everything is taken care of. But when Mr. Summer—" Graham laid the forged will on the desk. Her face shifted. Just slightly, but enough. "Mrs. Turner," he said, addressing me formally, "this document bears a signature claiming to be yours. But we've confirmed with handwriting samples that it is a forgery." He slid the photo across the table. "Your daughter submitted it." The silence that followed was deafening. My ring pressed cold against my skin as I twisted it, grounding myself. Emily's eyes darted from me to the solicitor, then to Mrs. Solicitor Harper, who sat with arms folded, lips pursed in disapproval. "That's ridiculous," Emily snapped. "Mum probably forgot she signed it. She's been confused lately." Her voice cracked on confused. I reached into my bag and placed the pill bottle on the table. "Then explain this. Swapped pills. Stronger dosage. Do you think I didn't notice?" Her cheeks flushed crimson. "You don't understand," she hissed, her veneer shattering. "I've looked after you. I've done everything. And what do I get? Nothing. You sat on all this money while I've struggled. I deserve it. Finally, I'll get what's mine." The words tore through me. Mrs. Harper gasped softly. Mr. Graham remained steady, pen poised over his notepad. "You were my joy, Emily," I whispered, my voice breaking, "and you tried to erase me." For the first time in my life, my daughter didn't look like my daughter. She looked like a stranger, wild, greedy, unrecognizable. The confrontation ended not with reconciliation but with cold reality. Mr. Graham assured me that the forgery would be reported and protections put in place immediately. Mrs. Harper reached for my hand, squeezing it firmly, grounding me in solidarity. Emily stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Her last words lingered in the air like poison. "You'll regret this, Mum. You'll regret crossing me." But for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange release. The lies were no longer festering in secret. The truth was out. The authorities would step in. The solicitor would ensure safeguards. The battle had scarred me, but I had survived the moment I feared most, looking my own daughter in the eye and seeing the truth. The pills, the forged will, the photo, the ring I refused to take off. All the symbols of my life had come together in that room, testifying on my behalf when my voice trembled. It wasn't the end. But it was the turning point. The days after the confrontation were heavy, but the air felt different, lighter somehow, as if truth itself had lifted the ceiling off my chest. Mr. Graham kept his word. He filed the forgery evidence with the authorities and arranged protective measures so Emily could no longer access my accounts. The relief was immediate. For the first time since the lottery win, my money was mine again. But more importantly, my dignity was mine again. The fallout with Emily was swift. Investigators contacted her, and the bank froze her access to everything she had managed to wriggle into. The tone of her calls to me changed from patronizing to frantic, then to venom. I stopped answering. I no longer owed her explanations. The community I'd been cut off from began to return, step by step. Mrs. Harper knocked on my door again, this time with a casserole and a warm hug. "I knew something wasn't right," she whispered. Word spread quietly through the church, through the high street. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months stopped by with kind words, small gifts, offers of help. Their presence reminded me that I wasn't alone, not really. I made a decision then that gave me peace. I went back to Mr. Graham and arranged for my finances to be placed in trust, not for Emily, but for her children, my grandchildren. They were innocent. Whatever darkness had taken root in their mother, I refused to let it poison their futures. The trust would ensure they had support for education, for life, without Emily's interference. That was the truest justice I could find, protecting the next generation while bypassing the one who had tried to erase me. Poetic justice revealed itself slowly. Emily was left out in the cold, furious, and isolated. She had no access to my money, no control over my house, no power over me. She was left to reckon with her choices, her anger consuming her while I reclaimed my quiet life. Symbols that once frightened me became anchors again. My wedding ring never left my finger, a constant reminder of Michael's love and the stability he always promised me. The photo stayed on the fridge, not just as evidence of a forgery, but as a marker of what family once meant. Even the pill bottles, now freshly dispensed and double-checked, no longer carried fear. I trusted them again, trusted myself again. Life didn't return to what it had been, but it settled into something safe, steady, and deeply mine. One quiet morning, I carried my coffee into the garden, the steam rising into the frosty air. The robins darted between branches, and for the first time in months, I simply breathed without fear. I was clear-headed. I was safe. I was free. I had faced betrayal in its cruelest form, but I had survived it with truth and dignity intact. That, I realized, was worth more than all the money in the world. I want to leave you with this. Money revealed the truth in my own family. It wasn't greedy strangers at the door or scam calls that nearly destroyed me. It was the voice of my daughter, whispering in the next room. The betrayal came from where I least expected it. That is the hardest part to accept, not just the danger I faced, but the grief of knowing that my own child looked at me and saw a number instead of a mother. And yet, through it all, I learned something vital. Dignity matters more than wealth. Awareness, vigilance, the courage to trust your instincts, those things are priceless. The lottery gave me security, but it was my determination to protect myself that gave me freedom. I still wear Michael's ring. I still keep the photo on the fridge. And I still take my morning coffee in the garden, breathing in peace. Those are my riches. Not the money, not the figures in the bank, but the dignity of knowing I survived and safeguarded what truly mattered. So I ask you, if you had been in my place, what would you have done? Could you forgive your own child for trying to erase you? Or is some betrayal too deep for forgiveness? Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine, because silence nearly destroyed me. Speaking out saved me. And maybe, just maybe, it will help save someone else too.